Hello there, and welcome to the CB7 podcast. My name's Palm.
And I'm Andy.
And together, we are Chrono Passion 7. Hello and welcome to another show. It's an interview show today, a very special one, with industry insider and podcaster Rob Nudds. Andy, let everyone know all about Rob.
We met some time ago at a Frederic Constant party, and we've been talking ever since. And obviously we found out about the real-time podcast, which is awesome. Make sure to check that out. He's worked for aBlogtoWatch, Revolution magazine, so he's a editor at large, freelance writer, brand business development manager, advisor for so many awesome brands, and just a great guy to just pick his brains and understand this industry. We're trying to get to the bottom of how this whole world works, right? And just a little bit more texture behind that. Started from the age of 17 and as a watchmaker soon after that. So quite the journey. Rob, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well. I'm blushing after that introduction. I'm afraid that even after 20 years or 21 years, I think it is now in the industry, I still don't have the answers that you might be seeking for. Let's see how it goes.
I'm sure you will. But before we get into any of that, let's do a wristwatch check. So, Rob, what have you got on your wrist then?
So I promise I didn't do this deliberately, although I'm not afraid of a little bit of self-promotion. I am wearing the Real-Time Show's first collaboration piece, which is a watch done with German brand Sherpa with our friend Martin Klocker. Both Alon, my co-host on the Real-Time Show, and I met Martin separately last year at two different events. I met him in Helsinki and Alon met him in Geneva. Now, when we met him, he had two pieces, a polished, white bezeled, black dialed ultra dive and a blacked out case, black dial, black internal bezel OPS model. Now, we don't love coated cases ourselves. We prefer steel cases, but we love the blasting. We love the stealthy look, the military vibe, the tactical feel to it. So we said, why don't you do the black dial in a blasted case? We'll do a little bit of TRTS engraving on the back and jobs are good. And he said yes, thankfully. Wow. And so I have this one here. You guys can see it on the video. Our listeners can't, unfortunately, but there it is. It's a beaut. I obviously liked it to begin with, but I fell in love with it very quickly. When you look at it, it has a real tool aspect to it. And I don't mean that in the traditional overarching tool watch sense. I mean, it really feels like something that you should only be able to buy in like a specialist shop. You know, like a Blancpain 50 Fathoms original. That's what it made me feel like. It feels too technical to be a luxury watch, but it is. And it's mostly made in Europe, so awesome watch.
Brilliant. So we make sure to add that to our show notes, right? So on IG, on Instagram, we make sure we add that picture.
Yeah, that's going on Instagram for sure. So that's very nice. And now, Andy, what have you got on your wrist?
So I'm wearing a gold G-Shock, not a solid gold G-Shock, otherwise it's over 100k. So it's the B5000 full metal gold. And a good friend of ours sent this watch out to me to basically check out. I'm very new to G-Shock. It's not a brand whatever jumped out to me, if I've sorry to offend anybody, but it's just not been in my world yet. I've kind of toyed with the idea back in 2019. This is how this watch ended up coming to me when I just spoke with my friend. Or like, yeah, back in 2019, I was thinking about that full gold. If I'm going to wear G-Shock, I want it to be ostentatious. I want it to be out there, a bit ridiculous, a bit playful. Every time I see the watch, remind myself not to take life too seriously. It's like, I've got that watch and it's not really doing it for me. Let me send it out to you, see what you think. If you like it, we work something out, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be working something out soon. It's great fun. Quite big, quite heavy compared to what I normally wear. But yeah, that's what I'm rocking. But Pam, I think I know what you're wearing.
You know what I'm wearing. So I am still doing Explorer January. So, Rob, let me just explain what the hell that means. It means I gave challenge to myself to see if I could wear one watch all month without changing it at any stage. So I've had this on now for over 2 weeks. So it's still there and I'm still going strong.
It looks like a 39 or a 40 mil version. What is it?
It is a 39. It's a 214270, the 39 millimeter version. It's just something you can just wear. Really easy. Sits on the wrist nice and flat. Perfect size for me. Legibility is amazing and it just goes with anything. So I love it and it's staying with me all month.
You're brave, man.
You know, one of our listeners on the Real-Time Show is a guy called Vu Bowie, and he's just launched a new podcast himself called This Watch Live, I believe. And they were talking about the perfect one watch and optical. But then when they drilled down to that one watch, he did settle on the Explorer Explorer 1, as they termed it, thinks it's the watch. So
But
there you go.
It's ironic because so many people say that. I think Adrian Barker talks about that. And I watched a YouTube video, Justin Hast, on his channel, and he had a guest on. I can't remember his name now. And he had a 36mm Explorer, and he said that was his one and done. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but it seems to be, if you get one, you fall in love
trend.
with it.
Look, it's good enough for Roger Smith. That's the benchmark for me. So when we met Roger Smith, he was wearing a 36 Explorer. So I'm like, that's a watch. That is the perfect watch. It has to be. But yeah, shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's move into
Question our guest.
Rob's Inquisition.
Can't wait.
Grill
Bring it
time.
on.
Really hard hitting questions. No. So I want to touch at the very beginning. And I know you came into the industry at a very young age. And I'm trying to, I want to understand, when did the penny drop for you? What was it about wristwatches? What just made you go, you know what, from 17 onwards, this is what I want to do and live and breathe? What was that pinnacle moment where like the penny dropped and you're like, this is it, I love watches?
Well, there definitely was a moment, but it wasn't when I was 17. It came after that, actually. I always had an interest in mechanics, the way things worked, building things with my hands. I didn't have too many toys when I was a kid, but I did have plasticine, and I used to make all my figures out of plasticine. And when I wanted a new figure, I would mash it up and make a new figure out of plasticine. And I would make massive medieval villages. Well, massive is probably the wrong word. I mean, like tiny, smaller than Lego figures. And I would make sure that all of the knights had movable helmets and armor and removable shields and swords. And I had this real sensitivity, I think, for details in creation. But I fell into my job at H. Samuels. That's where I started working when I was 17, because my girlfriend at the time had a job there, and she got me a job in the store in Manchester on Market Street. And I was just coincidentally placed on the watch side of things, and I did strap changes and battery changes with absolutely no training whatsoever. At one point, managed to smash the crystal on a Rolex, an old one, because I didn't know how to use a caseback fitter, which was embarrassing. But in those days, I mean, this is 21 years ago, like I say, in those days, the Rolex bubble hadn't quite expanded to the size it has expanded to now. So it wasn't so much of a big deal. I got away with it. And I did this job at H. Samuels for the next 3 years. I went to university when I was 18 and did an ill-advised degree in archaeological science because I lost a bet to my best mate and he got to pick my degree. And
Interesting.
while I was there, I had enough time to get a full-time job. So I went and started working as a t-shirt designer in a little clothing company. And I really fell in love with just making things again. I guess by the time I was about 20, I realized that I wanted to do something with my hands. And because I was working in fashion, and I say that in inverted commas, my first thought was to be a tailor. And I'd always sewed my whole life. I'd always made things as a kid, like toys for other people at school and whatnot, and clothes for myself. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll be a tailor. But then I thought, well, what's the next level of that? What's even higher than a tailor? And coincidentally, I just remembered watches from my time at H. Samuels, which I was still doing back in the summers, going back and working there. So I ordered a catalogue from Lange & Söhne, of all places. I thought that would be a good place to start to try and do some research, but I didn't really expect that they'd send me one, because I thought at the time, being young and naive and quite new to the internet, that someone like that or a brand like that would be able to tell that I was a penniless student, several £1,000s in debt, emailing them from Purple Monkey Clothing in the middle of Sheffield without 2 pennies to rub together, and wouldn't send me a catalogue. But lo and behold, they did. And they didn't just send me a catalogue, which, by the way, I don't know if it's still the same. I haven't ordered one for years, but in those days, it was massive. It was like a bound book. It was beautiful. The printing was exceptional. The story of Lange, the history of German watchmaking, the history of Glashütte, which is just 45 minutes away from me now, because I live in Dresden now, right close to the horological hotbed of watchmaking in Germany. It's an unbelievable privilege to be here. And it all started with that catalogue, because it, as well as the catalogue, there was a handwritten letter from someone in the communications department, like welcoming me to the Lange family. And I was so charmed by it. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And they had these incredible macro shots. This was probably even before Instagram, or maybe the year Instagram existed. I'm not even sure when it started, but this would have been about 2005, I guess. So I'd never seen a watch up close like that, even though I'd worked with them for years. Seeing the German silver bridges and the jewels in the gold chatons and the blued screws, the hand-engraved balance cock, the 3/4 plate, everything about that architecture just wowed me. And so I resolved, okay, I'm going to be a watchmaker. And I carried on working as a sales assistant for years, but there was nowhere really to train in those days that I was aware of. Coincidentally, the British School of Watchmaking opened its doors around that time, but that news didn't reach me until a couple of years later, by which point I'd started working for the Bank in New York, still doing my watch bits on the side, as it were. I worked for the bank for a couple of years and I was thinking, all right, this is definitely not for me. I would like to write. And to be honest, even from the early days of my watchmaking career at the bench, I knew that ultimately I would move into the journalistic area of the industry. My skill is probably more academic when it comes to the subject of watchmaking and the analysis of the industry. I'd heard of the British School of Watchmaking by that point, and I'd applied many, many times while I was at the bank for sponsorship. Now, in those days, there were 6 places in the British School of Watchmaking. 5 of them were sponsored by brands, and there was like Cartier, Swatch Group, Breitling. I think a jeweler from Northern Ireland had a place. I think it was called Lunds. And then another jeweler in the UK. Might have been Signet Group. It might even have been Signet Group. I'm not sure. So I was applying for one of these sponsored spots because I couldn't afford the 6th spot, which would have to be self-funded. I was applying mostly to the Swatch Group. Didn't hear anything back from any of them. And I kind of became disheartened and I thought, all right, I'm going to leave the bank. So I quit the bank and I left on my lunch break and I was walking down Market Street in Manchester and I walked past the Swatch shop and they had an advert in the window for a sales assistant. So I thought, oh, you know what? If I get a job in the Swatch Group, maybe I'll be able to get some contacts and maybe then I'll be able to turn that into a career. So I go into the shop and I apply for the job. And I mean, I must have looked ridiculous. I was in a full suit. I had an umbrella under my arm, a briefcase in hand, and I was going in applying for a sales assistant job. And they were like, all right, if you want, it's not the manager's job. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. I just love watches. So I went home that night. I downloaded the annual reports of the Swatch Group for the previous year, read them, memorized as much of it as I could, went in, embarrassed myself in front of the manager because they were like, what on earth do you think you need to know to do this job? If you love watches so much, fine, you can have the job, but please stop talking. I was like, all right, fair. Not the first time I've heard that.
There's a little tip there for everyone out there who wants a job in a watch shop. Just over-prepare.
I was only there for about 9 or 10 months, but as soon as I got in, I found out all the HR contacts in Southampton where the head of SG UK was. And I wrote the same application letter for the British School of Watchmaking to every member of that department, printed it off 4 times each and shoved them in the mailbox. So I thought, at least they'll know my name. And if I don't hear anything back, it's probably not going to happen. And a few months went by, I didn't hear anything. And then coincidentally on my day off, which I think was a Thursday that week, I was lying in bed and I got a call from the head of SG UK saying, you've made it down to the final 4 applicants of the British School of Watchmaking. And I was like, thanks. Okay, what do I have to do? He said, right, you've got to go to this testing day. And they're going to do a manual test, an IQ test, and they're going to interview you. So I'll get there. By the time I'm there, there's only 2 of us left in the running. And we went through the test together. I smashed the manual test. They made us disassemble and reassemble a ETA 6498, which is a piece of cake. And then the IQ test, I didn't fail it, let's put it that way. And the interview went all right because unwittingly I mentioned that when I was a kid I used to build bikes because I wanted to be a racing cyclist when I was a little kid, but I couldn't afford a racing bike because in those days you couldn't really buy a cheap racing bike from Decathlon. So I bought all my parts off eBay and from thrift shops and built the bikes and geared them all up. Never thought anything of it, but they were really impressed by this, which took me by surprise, and that was enough. That got me in. So I got that place. 2 years later, I moved down to Southampton, worked there for 2.5 years at the bench for Omega, primarily on coaxial movements, like the basic stuff. And then I went to Bremont, working mostly on chronographs, which is my favorite complication. So I really enjoyed that. And then I kind of fell into a job at NOMOS, and I've been talking for too long already, so I won't go into detail as to how that happened.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant story. Like, one thing I'll add is this is the right podcast for you to be on because we call it Chrono Passion, right? And the passion is, certainly there, and the willingness never to give up. So I think that's a good message for anybody who listens who wants to get anywhere in the industry, including for ourselves as well. Just keep at it. Yeah, don't take no for an answer.
You do have to be relentless and you have to really, really want it, I guess. For some people, it comes easy. Or there's people that end up into it in the industry by accident, and that's not really their fault. Like, they don't realize how much it matters to some people. Now, this would be the same as me going to, I'll pick the sneaker industry because I know Alon, my co-host, is a big sneakerhead. I like sneakers, but I'm not a sneakerhead. And if I went in there with my experience of the watch market and the luxury industry and so on and so forth, I could probably be a pretty effective consultant in many ways, but not sharing that passion to me would almost be an insult to the people who had to fight tooth and nail to get those positions that change their lives, that allow them to live their dream as I am doing mine. So sometimes I meet people and I'll be like, oh, what do you love about watches? And they go, I don't really like watches. And I literally turn white. I don't know what to do in this situation. I'm not prepared for it at all.
Yeah, we've spoken to a couple of people like that actually, and they're good, but I see what you mean. You kind of think that space could be filled by someone who has the passion to do the watches stuff.
Absolutely. But don't get me wrong. Obviously, those fresh eyes can offer a lot to the industry, and we need people like that. Of course, it's absolutely essential to the whole ecosystem that we have an influx of talents from different regions, that we cross-pollinate all of these industries that are closer than they are removed from one another. And so I was at Bremont. This was 2015. I started writing for aBlogtoWatch 3 days after I started at Bremont, I think. And I've been pestering Ariel Adams for 2 years prior to that, since I graduated, basically, to let me write for aBlogtoWatch. Because when I came out of the British School of Watchmaking, I got the top mark in theory. I actually got 100%, but they gave me 98.6 because they said nobody gets 100%. And I moaned about it, and I was like, tell me what I got wrong. I know I got this right. I was so well prepared for that exam. The only time I've ever revised for an exam in my life. I'd even built a blog which had explanations for every possible answer that had ever been, every question that had ever been asked on those tests since the test was released. And I gave all of the year below me access to the blog so they could revise from the notes that I'd been making to make sure that we all smashed that theory exam.
That's probably why they took the marks off, because you started helping everyone else. You made it too easy.
Probably. Yeah, well, I was trying to, because to be honest, if I have to be straight up, which I generally am to my own discredit most of the time, I wasn't very impressed with the way that the theory side of things was communicated. Now, in fairness to the teachers at the school, they're very much more practically minded and practically gifted than I was or ever would be. And just to temper the self-aggrandizing that's going on right now, I did come top in theory, but I came dead last in practical. So, there was a specialization there for sure. It wasn't like I was smashing it out of the park on every front. I knew what I wanted to do, and I was dedicated to being the best solver of problems theoretically, even if I were unable to solve them myself physically. So there are much more talented people around me in the year ahead and the year behind, and in my own year. So I really knew what my place was and what I could offer to the industry. So I got this qualification, and then I was banging on Ariel's door immediately saying, let me write for aBlogtoWatch. And he was like, yeah, you haven't got any experience. Go and get some experience somewhere else. Same thing I heard from everybody. Every year I'd go to Salon QP. I would corner James Gurney in the upstairs part of Salon QP, and I'd always wear ridiculous clothes so he'd remember who I was. Like I'd wear bright blue trousers or a spotty jacket. So I'd stick in his mind as this terrifying little kid that was like basically boxing him into a corner. And I was quite well built in those days as well. So I probably was like a sort of angry hobbit who'd had too many champagnes, saying, I want to write for Salon QP. How do I write for Salon QP? And he was like, go away and get some experience, you filthy little urchin. Be gone. Leave my presence. So I was begone, and I left his presence. And I went and I worked for this French blog of all things for 2 years as an editor, which is difficult because I don't speak French. But I did write some articles for them in English, some technical stuff, and I just got the name on my CV. I did it for free, totally for free, just helped this guy out because he wanted to build his blog. So eventually I go back to Ariel and I say, I want to write for you. I've got this, I've done this. He said, okay, do 3 test articles. If they're any good, then we'll give you a go. I did 3 articles, coincided with me getting the job at Bremont. And then over that 1 year that I spent at Bremont, I worked full time, and I wrote 134 articles for aBlogtoWatch, and I was just passing out on my laptop every night, basically. I had no social life. I saw my girlfriend, who was still in Bournemouth at the time. I'd met her when I was in Southampton at the weekends, but not every weekend, because sometimes I had to work because I wanted to make a name for myself. Anyway, I got sent to Salon QP that year as well for aBlogtoWatch. Super proud of myself. And I was at the NOMOS stand, and coincidentally, my old technical manager from Omega was on the NOMOS stand. She calls Susie Kloss. She still lives here as well, just around the corner. And I said, Susie, when are you going to open a workshop in the UK so I can come and be a watchmaker for NOMOS? And she said, not until we find someone to grow the UK market. Wait a second, why don't you do that? And I was like, well, I'm a watchmaker and a writer, maybe I said at the time. And she went, yeah, but you know watches, you love watches, you can talk about watches. Why don't you just have an interview? And I said, well, of course I'll have an interview. Yeah. But I really didn't want the job because I was terrified of flying in those days. You wouldn't believe it now because I love flying. But at the time, I was literally bricking it when I had to fly out to Berlin for an interview. Then I got a train down to Dresden, went to Glashütte, had an interview. They asked me what I wanted. I made a ridiculous demand because I knew I would never get it. They rejected it. But then somehow the boss got wind of the fact I'd rejected it and was impressed by my balls. So he made me come back to Berlin, made me sit down in front of him, have an interview in German, which at the time I didn't speak very well at all. And I think my stoicism / complete inability to comprehend what he was saying helped me get the job. So I accidentally left with the job. That was a nightmare. So a couple of weeks later, I was back in Germany doing my preparations for Baselworld that year, thrown in the deep end. UK market exploded. I wouldn't say that was entirely because of me as a person, but the fact that I was there and there was someone in the market was really what the brand needed to push it, and I was really pushing. So I did that for a year, UK and Ireland, and then because the market more than doubled in that year, they gave me Benelux, and that was quickly followed by Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, nominally Turkey, although I never went to Turkey, although I technically was the manager of Turkey, and then Canada and the US as like a sales trainer. So I ended up traveling around these 17 territories, working for NOMOS, making all these retailer contacts. I stopped writing for the most part while I was there because it would have been a conflict of interest. But then when the time came to leave and go back to journalism, I worked freelance. And yeah, Andy, you mentioned some of the blogs that I worked for in that interim period. And then I joined Fratello. I was there for 3 years as a managing editor to begin with, and then head of partnerships. And then I left to start the Real Time Show, which is now the second best podcast in watchmaking after this one, of course. So that's it.
Is there any more you want to add to that before I continue?
No, that's more than enough. I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking I don't want to know when it was I started talking, because that's a long time.
Don't worry about the clock. It's all about you today. So, first of all, to our listeners at home, check out the Real Time podcast with Rob and Alon Joseph, who we also met at the Frederic Constant party. Alon is the owner of Ace Jewelers in the Netherlands and another quite a big industry insider. But check out the show. It's a great one. I promise you, you will not regret listening. So that moves me on to my first question. And it was, after all that, I've got to double barrel it, I'm afraid. And so the answer might be even longer than the last one. What gave you the inspiration and motivation to make all those moves that you made? Because you made a lot of moves there. Was it advice, or you read the room well? You read the situation well, where I need to go here, I need to do this, I need to ask this person for that. What gave you that inspiration to do all those? Because you made some very good moves there, and they've obviously worked out well for you.
I never received any advice I followed. A lot of advice would have taken me away from this path. The majority of the advice I received, even from my dad, one of my best mates, but don't go to him for business advice. He wanted me to take the conservative route. I had quite a talent for FX markets. When I was at the bank, it was the only thing that I was really good at, but I had a feeling for it. And I got picked out of the intake in my year at the Bank of New York to go down to London and get a fast track on the FX trader course. And I turned it down because I didn't want to be a banker. Yeah, I probably would have made loads of money. Fair enough. But money, yeah, it's important. I do want to be stupidly rich one day. I'm not going to pretend that I don't. I only want that for security. I don't really want for much in my life. I mean, you guys can see the state of the headphones I'm wearing right now. They're in absolute bits, and I'm a professional podcaster. Like, I just don't care that much. I love watches. I want to do what I love all the time. I am a terrible employee. I am not somebody that can follow rules or fit into a hierarchy. I'm a dick when I'm annoyed and frustrated, and I am the worst type of myself. And I don't like being that person. I like being the best kind of me. And that guy is the one that is happy to risk everything, to fail repeatedly, to look like an idiot over and over again, to be doubted constantly, and to just keep going, because the belief for me inside was always enough to overcome the odds and to face down the failures. And I've had many failures in my life, some quite, I guess, emotionally devastating, but because I have a British upbringing, I am very good at suppressing my emotions and not dealing with them properly. So they're probably in a box somewhere. In fact, some people get to see them when I get angry and I go like Red Rob and just blow up, because I'm either as calm as a lake or as volcanic as an erupting volcano, which is not nice either, I'm sure. But I just believed, and I don't feel willing to accept anything less than trying as much as you possibly can. It's easy to say when it's worked. It's easy to say when, you know, all the chances you took eventually paid off. But I have to believe that they paid off because I never wavered. And I just couldn't live any other way. I don't know how to. That's
well,
it.
so which one have we got, the calm one here or the angry one?
This is the calm one. Yeah.
That's
Although
relief.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am quite red.
Why me? I don't want to meet the angry one then. Yeah. But so then, saying all that leads in perfectly to the actual original question I was going to ask you was, of all that you've done and all the moves you've made, what is the proudest moment to date for yourself?
I don't have one. I'm not a prideful person in a way that I can communicate. I think I am in my core. I think I am quite vain deep down. I think I want to be recognized. I think I want to be respected more than anything. And I don't want to be respected for the watch I'm wearing or the shoes that I've got or the house that I have or the car that I drive, which would be hard because I drive a Smart 4.4 and I keep driving it into walls. But I want to be respected for that work ethic, that belief, that willingness to risk something. But does it make me proud? Does anything make me proud? All my friends and family get on my back about this constantly, where they're like, why do you never stop to celebrate any of the moments in your life? Why did you not stop to celebrate when you graduated from watch school? Why did you not stop to celebrate when you got the job at Bremont? My family went nuts when I got the job at Bremont. They were so proud of me in a way that I've never seen them be proud of me before. My mum was telling her brothers about it, and they were all researching Bremont and sending me links to Bremont. I'm like, yeah, I know what the website is. Thanks, I work for them. But they were like obviously showing an interest in me, which like never happened. Not that I was neglected or anything, but it wasn't very interesting. So I was like, okay, you're into this, that's probably a good thing, but why should I be proud? This is just another step. I'm not done yet. Wait until I've done something. And I've been saying that all my life. Like, yeah, do I believe that I live the model that I espouse? Yeah. Do I think that's something people could follow? I actually do. Yeah. Do I think that sometimes it has given my friends strength to take a risk? I know it has. And that maybe makes me proud, prouder than any of my personal achievements in watchmaking. So yeah, okay, you got an answer for you there. That's it. It's the fact that the way that I pursued my career ultimately affected other people in a positive way and gave them that self-belief as well.
Inspiring.
Excellent. That's a brilliant answer. And that's quite heartwarming to hear that from someone in the industry as well. So that was your punching the air moment, was it? Well, look, you don't have to punch the air to make a good impact on those around you, but that's nice to hear.
I guess I don't stop enough. I know that. And I get very wound up when people doubt themselves. One of the greatest pleasures in my career has been finding young talent. The majority of the team at Fratello now are people that I brought on board when I was managing editor, and they're flying and they're doing great work. And it's brilliant. I don't know if it's actually the literal majority, but like people like Nacho, people like Dave, people like Thomas, these great guys, they are doing wonderful work. And they had no right to get those positions, none whatsoever. They didn't have any experience. They just had this passion that I thought was enough, a kernel of talent that could be nurtured, and they made the most of their opportunity. And that's just wonderful to see, because there's so many people that just get it without trying. I'm allergic to that. It's those guys, the people that are going to outwork everybody else and really fuel themselves with a passion. They're the ones that need to be held up, in my opinion. They're good guys.
Brilliant. What an answer. Again, yeah, just inspiring. It's hard to know where to go from here, but judging by the time we're ticking up to, I think we've got to present day, right, to where you are today. I feel there's something similar because I've got a bit of this constant hunger all the time to just keep doing, like I jump in and out of different ideas, different projects. And do you feel content where you are? And if not, what's the next stage? Where do you want to be? Where's the final destination? Like, is the final destination having your own independent watch brand at some point? I'm putting your own vision out there, or is it having a huge podcasting network and your own blog article website? Like, what is the end goal, or are you already there?
I'm definitely not there. I don't really have an end point that continues after my heart stops beating. So what do I want that I still haven't got? Yeah, I'd like to grow the real-time show. It will become the real-time network soon enough, and it will become the biggest audio platform in the industry. I'm sure of it. And I look forward to overseeing that with my colleagues at the show. I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and that will be very satisfying because it's given me the opportunity to really implement all the stuff I've learned working for some of the finest media houses in the watchmaking industry. I've been very, very lucky to have had that opportunity to learn from so many of the greats in the industry right now. So that'll be very rewarding. I would like to make more collaborative pieces with brands I respect. I have designed some watches from scratch for some brands that are in the early stages of development now, so that'll be nice to see my watches actually get out there. Would I like my own brand one day? Absolutely yes. I think that's probably the dream of most young watchmakers when they start out at the bench. I have been through many drafts of what that brand would look like, what the watches would be. I have actually designed a movement with a I wouldn't really call it a complication. It's not a complication. It's a function that's never been implemented in watchmaking before, and it has an architecture that requires some pretty futuristic materials to be integrated to the caliber. But I'm working on that conceptually at the moment, and I hope one day to be able to bring it to life. That would be my contribution to watchmaking, I think. I'd like to make a technical contribution to watchmaking. What's the end goal? I don't know. The industry changes, it evolves. There's always something new to learn. There's always new people to mentor and new people to be mentored by. So I guess I'll keep going till I get bored or until I drop dead. And I'm pretty sure the latter will come first.
Okay, that's a bit of a grim thought there, but I can. You have got a lot. You're spinning a lot of plates, but I think that's just amazing. So going back to the show, the Real Time Show, your podcast. You've got a lot of heavy hitter guests on there. You have a lot of serious industry insiders, and you do your own shows as well, just you, yourself and Alon. Is it being in the industry for so long that has allowed you to network so well? Or is there a magic formula you have, your magnetic personalities or something like that? Because going back to, you like to encourage people to believe in themselves. How do you get all of that out there to get the result you want for the show?
A lot of it is about being in the industry for a period of time. But although I've been in and around watches for 21 years, my industry-facing career really only began with the NOMOS job. And to be honest, it really only took off in the way that it has with Fratello. Now, NOMOS offered me a weird opportunity, and that was to get to know a retail network. So I was managing 17 territories. I was training 70 retailers in North America, meeting all these people, all of their clients at events and whatnot. Remember, I'm flying in, I would have 8 flights in a week, fly into a state, do an event, fly out in the evening, wake up in a new state, do an event, fly out, blah, 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 bang, 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 every day. And I'd be meeting maybe 30, 40, 50 people. I'd be giving them my contact details. I'd be staying in touch with them. I'm making friends. It's not too difficult if you like people, which I generally do, and especially if you already have the common interest of watchmaking, and that's a pretty niche interest. And if you have an insatiable desire to learn about watches, you always have questions you can ask people, and they can always give you something that not only enriches your experience of the industry, but pins them in your mind. You remember them because they taught you something. So I built a massive network of people on the ground level through the retail, and then through media. Working for Fratello was really useful because I was in a really powerful position because I had direct contact to the brands, and I was representing one of the biggest media houses in the world. When I started, we were maybe fourth or third, arguably. And then by the end of it, we were really number 2 behind Hodinkee. So we had a lot of sway. You can open a lot of doors that way. And once you've got in front of somebody, your success will be measured firstly on what you bring to the table, but also on your character. Are you worth staying in touch with? Are you somebody that these people enjoyed working with? Are you somebody that people remember when you walk into a room? You can have a faceless spreadsheet pusher doing the job that I did, but if they don't make the effort to engage on a human level with the people across the table from them, then they might as well not exist. So I think that it helps to, obviously, my activities, my professional activities put me in the position where I could meet these people. But if you like people, then that's easy. To your second point of how do you get somebody to really do what they want to do, even if they have that self-belief, maybe lack that self-confidence, firstly, lead by example, show them how to do it, take them by the hand, introduce them to people, encourage them that it's not always a bad idea to visualize what kind of person they want to be in that situation. This isn't to say that you need to be fake, I don't think, but I was a very timid young man. I was very shy. I was not particularly, how can I say it, aggressive.
Yeah, we could tell.
Well, quite. I was nothing like the way I am now. I had a personality transplant in my mid-20s. I'm not quite sure what happened to me, maybe too many head injuries. I've had a few, but I imagined what the ideal person would be in that situation. Just like if you're designing a watch for any specific situation, what's the perfect tool? What do you need if you're diving? What do you need if you're climbing? What do you need if you're hunting? What are the things that could help you in that situation? Eye contact, body position, the way that you walk towards somebody, the look on your face, not like indulging your tics or your habits, mentally controlling everything about yourself, conditioning yourself to be a person who can survive in that world. Because when I first stepped into that world, I was so naive and I was so vulnerable, and I was almost chewed up and spat out before I had a chance to get going, because I ran into a very small clique of British journalists. The clique still exists to an extent, but some of them have dropped out of the industry and the others have kind of matured to the point where they wouldn't do what they tried to do to me to anyone else. But they basically tried to crush my career before it started, because they thought, this guy is not right for this industry. He doesn't have the right accent. He doesn't have the right clothes. He doesn't have a nice watch. Oh, and he also happens to be a watchmaker, which unfortunately means he knows what he's talking about in this case. So he's a bit of a threat. And I think that was galvanizing in a way, because I was like, okay, I can get myself out of it, but I don't ever want to be in that situation again. So I won't ever be so open. I won't ever be so stupid, so wide-eyed, so dewy-eyed to go up to these people and to just be so honest and sort of say, oh, I'm new to the industry. Oh, maybe you could help me out. I don't really know what I'm doing, because people will use that against you. And I remembered that for years. And I kept that as an armor that I would put up in the early days. And I would actually advise anybody in the early days when they're feeling vulnerable to put up that armor. But don't keep it up. Learn when you can take it off. Learn when you can be yourself. I got criticized by one of my colleagues once for turning up to Watches and Wonders, and I think I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans or something, or cargo pants and trainers. And he was like, what are you wearing? And I was like, what I'm comfortable wearing. And he said, yeah, but this is an event. I said, it's a business meeting. I said, the people here do business with me because I'm good at what I do. And I don't need to dress up to tell them that I'm good at what I do. They will see the results. And he still called me a dick for it. Fair enough. That was his prerogative. But I thought I'd made my point pretty well. And it is important to know when to protect yourself and when not to. When to say, okay, I've reached a point in my career where vulnerability is my strength. Openness is my strength. Honesty is my strength. I can walk into any brand now and say, this is what I do to improve your sales. But I know I can't guarantee it, and this is why, and why. And I can say that, and I can balance the equation now, just not to make a fool of yourself. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
That happens in a lot of industries. When you start saying, I don't know, the vultures circle and they think, right, okay, we can make ourselves look better by... And as you say, I think it sounded like they were very threatened by you as well. I'm glad because you do have this kind of a steely nature to you now anyway. I didn't know you earlier on, but there is definitely this man means business kind of aura about you. So, yeah, cool. Thanks for that.
It's handy when you're 5'7". What can I say? You've got to have something about you. That's about it.
Okay, I've got a modern day question for you. Tell us about Arkano, the project you're on at the moment. Arkanaut, yeah, there you go. In sync, yeah.
All right. Well, Arkanaut is an independent Danish brand founded around 5 years ago. It had an early life under a different brand name while the guys behind it were figuring out exactly what they wanted to do with it. It was founded by Anders Brandt and Simon Goldman. Simon doesn't have so much to do with the day-to-day running of the business these days. It's mostly down to Anders, who is the founder and chief designer of the brand. One of the co-owners of the brand is James Thompson, otherwise known as Black Badger, the Gothenburg-based materials alchemist, who is best known for his collaborations with brands like MB&F, Linda Verdelin, De Bethune, Schofield, the one that started it all with my good mate Giles Ellis. So he's an interesting chap to work with. He's a Canadian living in Sweden, married to a lovely Swedish woman with 2 lovely Swedish kids. And together, and I am part of the team as the head of brand development for Arkanaut, are trying to grow this brand into an internationally recognized watch company. We focus mostly on using unusual materials for the dials. So the bread and butter models are made from a material we call dark matter, which is finely powdered Swedish slate, which is mixed with a ultra clear UV resistant binding agent to create a millable block of material that has a very nice stone-like texture to it, obviously, because it's made of stone.
That's easy for you to say.
Took a lot of practice, trust me. It's a funny thing to say to yourself in the mirror over and over and over again, but there you are. We've recently expanded the composites range, because that's kind of the core composite model, to include Havender, which is Swedish mussel shells. That's hard to say quickly. Ground down into a fine powder, also mixed with a resin to create a beautiful purple dial. And then we have the Clint, which is much easier to make. That's powdered titanium dioxide, which is kind of like the base component of pretty much every paint. But the cool thing about it is our dials aren't painted, they are solid material. So it's like solid white all the way through, solid purple all the way, solid black all the way through. And then we have the Fordite dials, which are made from Fordite, which is a waste product from the automotive industry, mostly in North America, around Detroit, Michigan, in the area. When paint in the paint bays would be oversprayed from a door or a side panel or whatever, it would accumulate on the walls and floors and jigs and tools and whatnot, eventually forming these massive lumps of material that had to be chiseled off and then normally disposed of. But some bright spark realized if you cracked them open, they had these incredible, inimitable patterns inside them, swirling. It's the most organic man-made material I know. It's also called Motor City agate to reflect its stone-like appearance.
Wow, that's well done. You get a round of applause for that.
That is a polished pitch, but such a fun brand, though. Yeah.
So what do you do there?
So what do I do there? I'm the head of brand development, which basically means I do everything apart from sweep the floor. And I've done that a couple of times as well. Anders does the design and the development of the models. We obviously consult on what kind of models we'd like to release, because this is integral to the growth of a brand, to have the right products available, the right kind of portfolio to deliver a very strong and clear message to your buyers and would-be buyers. I do the press, marketing, website consultancy, retail development. We have a couple of retailers, not many, but we will be adding a few more in the next few weeks. Do the communication side of things as well. Pretty much whatever needs to be done. Trying to guide the brands from a hand-to-mouth operation to a real understood story, I guess, is what I want. I want people to know what Archanaut is. I want people to recognize the name. The case, to me, Anders designed this case, and I think it's absolutely heaven. I was an Archanaut customer before I worked for the brand, and that was actually integral to me taking the role, because I met the guys when I think I was on the way back from Sweden. I'd been up to the space center in Sweden with Fortis, and I was traveling back, and I thought, I'll just stop back in Gothenburg and go see James and Anders and find out a little bit more about this weird little Danish brand. And at the time, I'd seen Dark Matter. The first model they did had sold out already. I missed it. I liked it, but I wasn't like crying into my coffee about it. I was like, yeah, okay, fine. Good watch. Great case. Can't wait to see what they do next. And then they did the Fordite. I didn't like it at all. It was too chaotic, too bonkers, too 70s for me. I was like, nah, I'm never going to buy a watch like that. That's crazy. And then I got there and I met them and I talked to them, and my love for the case became unwavering. It was absolutely rock solid. I was like convinced I had to have one of these models on my wrist at some point. And something clicked with the Fordite. I'm not sure which dial it was that made me realize I could fall for it. I didn't buy that initial one. I waited a little while until I really fell in love. And then I found one. I think we called it Blue Blood or something like that. It was all maroon, but it had this drip of light blue through the middle of it. I'm not a West Ham or Villa fan, but if I were, that would be the perfect watch. You know what I should have done? I should have bought it and given it to Mike Pearson. Mike from Christopher Ward.
Yeah.
He's a big Villa fan. Yeah, that was stupid actually, because what happened was I did buy it, but a customer who'd been looking for the perfect Fordite dial for him for ages, he saw mine on Instagram and was like, I want that one. And he'd been on the list for months, and Anders was tearing his hair out. And I said, look, customer always comes first. If we're going to grow this brand, you can take my watch and you can give it to him. So that what I didn't explain there was I bought that watch before I joined the brand. Then I left Fratello, and then Anders contacted me 2 days after and was like, I need you to join Archanaut. I know that you will believe in this brand and back it because you've got skin in the game, because you put your money down, you bought a watch. Because the thing is, a lot of guys, they see those watches and they go, that's like $3,950 excluding taxes for a Soprod powered watch. Are you kidding? And I know what goes into it, so I know that you're getting a damn good deal, because that kind of case architecture, not easy. Those kind of dials, they're all handmade, and in the case of Fordite, totally unique. And I understood that story after getting close to the brand, but it took that time. It wasn't like an instant thing. Like I said, initially, I wasn't bothered about it at all. But then I put my money down, and I didn't ask for a shred of discount, which sounds like a very privileged thing to have to point out. But I was in that privileged position as a journalist where I could easily have said, look, if you give me this cost price, I'll write you an article. It happens all the time. I don't do it anymore myself. I have done it in the past, and I did it once. It wasn't pay for play. It was actually, I'd been writing articles about a brand for years, and then I decided I wanted to buy one of their watches, and the guy gave me discount, and I didn't decline the discount, and I felt guilty about it ever since. And I say it to him openly. I said, you changed my perspective. I have to, as an analyst, put my money where my mouth is. And it's brutal sometimes because you know you can get watches for free, or you know you can get watches at a massive discount. But I just can't do it anymore. I buy fewer watches, but I buy the ones I believe in, and I put my money there because I believe in those brands and I want them to succeed. And that's how I felt with Arcanaut. And that's why I took the job, because if I hadn't had that belief, I wouldn't have taken the job. Because if I'd have been like, yeah, good watch, but I wouldn't put my money down on it, why am I going to work for you? But I knew that it was possible. I knew that there were people out there like me who knew what they were looking at, that would see that that was value in its own way. So I took the job, and now I basically do whatever Anders needs me to do and whatever I feel needs to be done in addition to that to grow the brand responsibly and sustainably. We want it to be around for 50, 500, 5,000 years. We want it to outlive us all. So that's what we're building towards.
Great answer. Short question, long answer.
Classic.
So got the right man for the job once again. But yeah, such a fun brand. We'll make sure as well, of course, to put it all over our Instagram so everybody can check it out.
What does Arcanauts mean? What's it stand for? What's the origin of the name?
That's a good question, Pam. It's a made-up word, but it means traveller through hidden knowledge, effectively. So the suffix "naut" on anything means like voyager or traveller, and Arca comes from arcane, as in old or hidden, obscured knowledge. So it's supposed to just be a little nod to our research into the watch industry and our attempt to push it in a new direction.
Nice. I like a smart name. That's a smart name. Yeah, excellent.
It's very, very similar to Aquanaut, though, isn't it? That's the problem.
But that's not a brand, though, is it? That's not a brand. That's a model.
True.
Yeah, exactly.
More about knowledge than traveling through the water.
True.
So from your experience, from your expertise, and I've asked this to other insiders in the industry before, which brand, like major brand, what many people probably know, do you think needs saving right now? Which brand would you like to get your hands on? Like, you get frustrated seeing what they're doing, and you could help them if you could get in there. I know you've got a different goal right now, but hypothetically, which brand do you think needs attention right now in the industry? What's just lost and not really bringing to market what they should be doing?
Okay, and this is actually born of respect. This is a brand new brand, has one watch. We briefly interviewed him for the real-time show. Stefan von Gunten of Haute Reeve has conceived one of the finest complications. Not really a complication. It's a 1,000-hour power reserve. It's not a complication at all by definition, but one of the finest movements I've ever encountered. And I think that case architecture, able to contain a movement of such power, is incredible. But I think the aesthetics of the case and the dial, and I told him this in person, so it's why I feel comfortable enough saying it on air, I don't think they're there. And I'm concerned at this juncture in watchmaking about that brand's ability to get over the initial hurdle necessary to then develop that technology and spread it across a range of watches that may be more palatable to a modern audience. If he'd launched it 2 years ago, and it's a cruel thing to say, the hype throughout COVID would have probably buoyed him to a point where he'd been able to already have sold out his second collection. I got the watch in hand. Functionality is amazing. Like the winding of the mainspring with the bezel is ingenious. I chewed his ear a little bit about the construction of the movement. I was like, mainspring must be on the back. You've moved the escapement to the front. How have you done this? And he was quite pleased to tell me, because I was asking the questions that very few journalists would be asking. And we had a good rapport. I said to him there and then, I said, look, you know what? If this was in like a modern, edgy sports case, it would blow minds, like left, right, and center. Like if you do something like this, and even if you put it in like a basic case, like take a brand like Crayon, for example, that's a brand I didn't get at all until I got the watches in hand. They are freaking unbelievable. Like they're so nicely finished, gorgeous. Case is pretty boring. Like no one's going to identify a Crayon silhouette from across the room. It's not like a Moser Streamliner, for God's sake, or a Bulgari Octo Finissimo. No chance. But it's fine. It doesn't detract. But there's something about that Haute Reeve where it's like this technology, although inspired by a clock, needs to really be pointed towards the future rather than the past, I think. So I don't want it to sound cruel. It comes from a place of love and respect for the brand and the mechanism that Stefan has developed. But for me, like in the current climate, that's tricky.
Yeah.
That's tough. And I think he needs something fast to really like show people what the future of that brand is going to be. So that's my answer.
I totally agree. An amazing brand, incredible, not a complication as you
yeah.
say, but mechanism to how it's got such a power reserve in there. But yeah, maybe it needs that modern, sporty. It is the market. Unfortunately, right now, it needs to have that edge. Yeah.
It is. That's interesting because I did mention that, and I know you're a massive fan of the Streamliner, Rob. I know, but I think Moser kind of, with a lot of their models, have that same round case, old world dress watch kind of thing. And the Streamliner really has put them up there and out there more in the eye line of the watch buyer, I think. And journalists and everyone are flocking all over the Streamliner, which probably is their biggest watch. And I can see exactly what you're saying. When you've only got the old world design, it probably could set some challenges for you.
Right.
It needs that iconic look, right? Like the Streamliner it's got its own ID, right? Now that is a Moser Streamliner. It's unique. You need that, yeah.
I mean, let's not mince our words. You need something like that to elevate the rest of the collection, to give it context, to make it something that people will come to and then have the chance to discover the other bits and bobs. Look at Chapek. Started off with the Kaiderberg model, very classical, slightly oversized for a classical watch, enamel dial, blue hands, really nice, but didn't really catch fire until the Antarctique came, drew the attention, and then those models sold hand over fist. Same really with the Moser stuff. Before the Streamliner, they were selling just fine. They were, but they weren't selling as well as they are now because of the Streamliner. And it's a tough thing to say for an independent watchmaker, like a true artisan like Stefan, to say, oh yeah, I expect you to have a fully fledged range with an absolute humdinger of a sports watch front and center. But it's a competitive market out there and it's tough. Like, are people going to buy a watch for the cost of that watch because it deserves to be an expensive watch because it's really freaking hard to make? But it doesn't look like they want it to look. Maybe. I'm sure he's probably sold out those models. And I'm not saying that he hasn't. I'm not saying he's sort of panicking and worrying and struggling. But I have this philosophy that was always difficult to communicate to my German colleagues when I was at NOMOS. I call it the +1 theory. Right? +1 does not mean it's a success or as good a success as it could be. If you look at a balance sheet and the arrows are up and green, that does not mean that you made the right decision. That just means that you didn't make a terrible decision necessarily. Like I used to say to Nomos all the time, let's do this radical marketing push, let's try something mad. And they go, yeah, but you sold more pieces last year than you sold the year before. I said, yeah, I sold 10 more pieces, but I want to sell 100 more pieces. Sometimes you've got to look for, even when you're successful, that's maybe the most important thing. Like, what did you do wrong? What could you have done more effectively in the future? And you look at a watch like that, like Stefan's Haute Reeve, yeah, it might sell out. Does that mean it was the right watch? For the moment, maybe it was, but will it be the right watch next time? Not necessarily. Is it the watch to build the brand? Is it a watch that will get its hooks into the industry? I don't know. Technology is there. He's there. That's great. Yeah, a watch could be a bit more edgy, let's say.
But again, as you say, it's a compliment to him that you believe it's not doing him justice. Justice in the fact that the technology is there, it's an amazing watch, but you think he can showcase his skills and talents much more. I mean, being such a decorated, established watchmaker as well, having worked for Patek, he had quite a few patents, didn't he, while he was at Patek?
He's a legend. Like, he's the real deal. He's the real McCoy. Like, you know what I would say to him? Smart thing to do. Team up with Kari. Team up with Kari's workshop. Get a banging dial, put on that movement in a reduced, I don't know, platinum case or something, a little more like under the radar. Use that as a transitional model. Make the collaboration, the big noise, get that out there, and then kind of feed that into a core collection with a dial inspired by it, made by Schwarzetti and someone like that, someone of equal kind of competence. That's what I did.
Brilliant advice, I think, yeah. But and it's a small team, isn't it, as well? Is it like, I think there's just 3 behind it almost. It's not a big team behind that brand at the minute. And maybe that's what he needs, a bit more of a fresh vision pumping into it,
Well, I'll drop him a line and see if he's interested in bringing me on to the books officially.
Yeah, there you go, yeah. Yeah. We sparked that new initiative.
He'll probably bottle me next time he sees me.
Yeah. So, if you're listening, Stefan von Gunten, this is what you need to do. But we spoke to him at Geneva Watch Days, and he did kind of mention production challenges because, again, his operation isn't the largest. He's what you would say an independent watchmaker. So his operation isn't huge. But excellent talk, great answers to the questions. And thank you so much, Rob. So on closing, Andy, is there anything you want to say to the listeners?
Thank you so much for listening this far as well. I mean, it's such a compelling story what we've had today with Rob. You know, I want to listen to the whole story again anyway once the podcast is out. So I hope everybody feels the same way I do. Please make sure to follow Rob on IG, follow the Real Time Show. Absolutely fantastic podcast, great guests, great knowledge, great insights. But Pam, you'd be happy for me to be saying it's goodbye from me for another show.
I am indeed. But thanks so much, Rob. Thanks for coming on. Hopefully we can have
Very
you on
good.
again. Thank you very much. So we will see you and you will hear us in the next one.